Welcome to Sitcom Showdown, a podcast that reviews classic sitcom episodes and inducts them into our very own Hall of Fame. As usual, one of us has chosen a sitcom episode and the other guy has no idea what it's going to be. Will they already know it? Will they love it? Can they be convinced that it's worthy? Let's find out on the Sitcom Showdown. Hello dear listener and welcome to Sitcom Showdown episode 88, and this time it is Steve's turn, and I'm very excited to ask him what the episode is going to be this time around.
Thanks Jeff. This is an episode of Blackadder the Third called Amy and Amiability. I want to start by defining amiability.
Oh cool.
That's the quality of having a friendly and pleasant manner or geniality. Geniality. So, by the way, this is the greatest sitcom episode of all time.
Oh, good, good.
As determined by me.
So we know where you stand on this one.
Yeah, I'm nailing my colours to the mast here early on.
Cool.
It's the third. It's from the third series of the BBC sitcom Blackadder, which aired on BBC One. And we've previously covered both Blackadder 2 and Blackadder Goes Forth on Sitcom Showdown. Blackadder 2 in episode 26 and Blackadder Goes Forth in episode 49. Anyway, the third series aired from the 17th of September to the 22nd of October 1987, quite a while ago now. And it was written by Richard Curtis and Ben Elton. Obviously a very famous pair of writers there.
Yeah.
And this particular series is set during the Georgian era. And it sees the principal character, Mr. E, or Edmund Blackadder, serving as butler to the Prince Regent, which is Prince George. He has to contend with the prince or cash in on him, as the fads of the age are embraced by his master. So yes, he's the E. Blackadder Esquire is the head butler to the Prince of Wales. Blackadder is played as usual by Rowan Atkinson, who came onto the scene with the 9 o'clock news, which was a sketch show that had Pamela Stevenson, Mel Smith and Griff Rhys-Jones in it, who we love Mel and Griff. Totally.
When did Not the 9 o'clock news start? Was that like 79 or just in 1980 or 81?
So that actually, it finished in 82. And then the first season of Blackadder came on soon after that in 83. So I don't think there were a massive amount of series of Not the 9 o'clock news.
Ooh.
And Rowan went pretty much from that straight on to the first season of Blackadder.
Far out.
And then Mr. Bean, probably his most iconic series, that started up in 1990. And that...
that's also Richard Curtis from memory.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, you're right. They've got quite the partnership.
Cool.
And then talking about partnerships with writers, after Mr. Bean started in 1990, that was followed up by The Thin Blue Line in 95 and 96.
Oh, which we love on this podcast, yes.
Yep. And of course, that was written by Ben Elton. So, we covered that one in episode 6 of Sitcom Showdown. And he's done a bunch of movies as well. Now, did you know that he was actually on the leaderboard of Top Gear's Star in a Reasonably Priced Car for some time?
Rowan is a famous driver of sorts, yeah, but I didn't know he was so up there.
Yeah, I didn't realise, but he's the one that Matt LeBlanc actually knocked off.
Really?
Yeah. So, he's a bit of a gun. Okay, moving on.
Cool.
Start talking about Hugh Laurie. So he plays the spoiled and foolish Prince of Wales. I've got highly successful Hugh written here.
Yep.
Just as I was reviewing his career, I was just amazed by the amount of stuff that he's done now. So we're going to have a quick talk about that. One of Hugh's first appearances was actually that guest appearance that he made on The Young Ones in the episode Bambi.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, where Laurie, Fry and Thompson and Ben Elton are all in the backseat of the car. So that was one of his first appearances on TV. Then, of course, he started Blackadder, and a bit of Fry and Laurie and Jeeves and Wooster came after Blackadder. So that's the chronology of some of his more famous early things. And
Filthy Rich and Cat Flap as well. Let's not forget.
Oh, how could I leave that out?
Which I'll bring up several times in this episode. His character was called Nabend.
So he had many guest appearances on British TV, but then he made this amazing transition to the US And that started with a series called House, which began in 2004. And that was actually a dramatic role. He played the lead character in that for 8 seasons. Since then, he appeared in 20 episodes of Veep, which ran from 2015 to 2019. He played a senator in that. Veep was adapted from The Thick of It.
Oh, yeah.
You probably remember that. Yeah, and that's got Julia Louis-Dreyfus in it. Then some more recent things. He's in a science fiction comedy called Avenue 5. Yeah, I will have to have a look into that at some point because I like science fiction comedy.
It's on my list, actually, Steve.
Oh, really? Which list is that?
I love Avenue 5. My list of things to bring onto the show, but it's one of those situations where, because everything carries on from the previous episode, most of the humour is, it took 3 episodes to build up for these gags to pay off. But as a production, it's great. And Hugh Laurie is fantastic in it, it has to be said. The poor chappie. But yes, he's great in that.
All right, I'll look forward to you figuring out how to do that
No
at some point. So he's just gone from strength to strength, that guy. Right, so let's move on to Tony Robinson, who plays Baldrick, Blackadder's dog's body. So he first came onto the scene in another sketch show, Jeff, called Who Dares Wins, which ran from 83 to 1988. And you know a lot more about this than I do because of some of the people in that went on to do other sitcoms.
Yeah, with Rory and Jimmy, and went on to Chelmsford 123, yeah.
So that's like a whole bunch of people who've done some interesting stuff. And then he went on to Blackadder. And he also appeared in Bambi, that episode of The Young Ones, which we've talked about before. And he was in that as Doctor Not the 9 o'clock News, which is obviously... they're having a bit of fun.
I like that.
Maybe they're... I don't know if... Maybe Who Dares Wins and Not the 9 o'clock News were rivals or... No, they weren't. Were they on at the same time?
I'm not sure if they were, I think, the Who Dares Wins might have been a bit later than Not the 9 o'clock News.
Hang on, I'm scrolling. No, it finished in... So Not the 9 o'clock News finished in 82.
Who Dares Wins?
Ran from 83 to 1988. Okay, so they weren't running at the same time. Anywho, then he went on to... He had a kind of a change of gears in his career, didn't he? Because then he went on to do Time Team for years and years and years, and other shows like The Worst Jobs in History. So
yeah, that's where he became a national treasure. I mean, as not a British person, I shouldn't really say who's a national treasure and who isn't. But certainly I'd consider Tony to be a national treasure in the same way that, or in a different way that you couldn't really call Rowan Atkinson a national treasure because he seems to be a bit of a churlish. He hasn't gone on to do anything documentary-ish like Time Team and things like that, I wouldn't imagine. But, Tony, Sir Tone, what a guy.
Tones.
Yeah.
Then we've got Miranda Richardson guest starring in this episode as Amy Hardwood. Mm-hmm. So she'd played Queen Elizabeth I, a.k.a. Queenie in Blackadder 2. As a series regular there, that was one of her first roles. But then she moved into more dramatic roles, and particularly into film. Oh. So just to let you know how good she is, she received 2 Academy Award nominations, 7 BAFTA Award nominations, and she won the BAFTA for Best Actress in a Supporting Role. Jeez. And she's been nominated for 7 Golden Globes, winning twice. And in 1996, one critic asserted that she is the greatest actress of our time in any medium.
Whoa, that's a big call.
So yeah, she's obviously pretty fab. And then we've got, lastly but not least, we've got Warren Clark guesting as Mr. Hardwood. And Warren was a well-known actor who passed away in 2014 while working on Poldark.
Oh.
He was best known for Dalziel and Pascoe.
Yes.
But he had many other movie and TV roles.
Oh.
We haven't missed anyone, have we?
Mrs. Miggins obviously makes an appearance in this one, and we spoke about her last episode, of course.
Yeah.
Alison. So that's always cool to see Mrs. Miggins.
Yep, it always is. So what are we going to do now? We're going to go have a little bit of a clip and then talk through what happens in this episode? The most fantastic episode of all time?
Yeah. Yes, let's do it and let's prove it.
All right.
Right, so what's the plan?
Well, I thought I could take her a short note, expressing your honourable intentions.
Yes, I think so too. All right then, we'll take this down. From His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales to Miss Amy Hardwood. Tally-ho, my fine, saucy young trollop. Now let's see. Trip along here with all your cash and some naughty night attire, and you'll be staring at my bedroom ceiling from now till Christmas, you lucky tart. Yours with the deepest respect, etc., signed George. P.S. Woof, woof. Well, what do you think?
It's very moving, sir. Would you mind if I changed just one tiny aspect of it?
Which one?
The words?
All right, so we're back from the theme tune. It's quite a nice theme tune to this season, isn't it?
It really is.
It's like is it a harpsichord or something like that?
Yeah, I'm just going to say yes.
Yeah, all right. So we open with Blackadder and Baldur's in the kitchen, and Blackadder's going through a mountain of personal bills. They're not bills that Prince George has racked up. They're his own bills. And he's so desperate, he asks Baldric to have a look in the biscuit barrel, because that's where he keeps the kitty, like the rainy day money. But there's nothing in there. By the way, Baldric is plucking a chicken, which makes several appearances throughout the episode. And he comes up with a cunning plan to solve Blackadder's cash flow problem, suggesting that he becomes a highwayman, which doesn't impress Blackadder. He's got a bit of a hatred of highwaymen for some reason.
Oh, he's got a hatred of everybody.
Yeah, well, he does. But particularly of these guys for some reason. Anyway, they're interrupted by the bell ringing, and he tells Baldric not to worry because he's going to ask the prince for a raise, which will cover the money that he's got owing. So he goes upstairs to do this, but the tables are turned, Jeff, because when he gets there, Prince George asks him for a loan.
Yeah.
It turns out that he's developed a gambling problem, and the problem is that someone told him that the game of cards involves being dealt a hand of cards and then giving away your money to the other players as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And Blackadder confessed to the prince that he seemed to be very bad at it and always ended up with more money than he had started with, which is awful.
Yes, but George is particularly good at it. And so they're both broke, it turns out. And Blackadder's running through the options and he says, well, you can't borrow money, you can't inherit money, and you obviously can't earn money. So you're just going to have to marry money, which George is initially reluctant to do. But he gets talked around and he says, right, well, if you go away and find a suitable person who meets all my criteria, then, I'll consider it. So that's what Blackadder goes off to do. Yeah. And so he heads back to the kitchen and he's running through, I don't know what book is it a Who's Who book or something like that, maybe? Or genealogy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Something like this. While Baldric is removing the innards from this chicken. And I don't know if you noticed, but one of the things he pulls out of the chicken is an egg.
What? No way. I didn't notice that.
From the cavity.
We're going to have to. We're going to have to come back to Baldric and this chicken later on in the wrap up.
Oh, we will. I know you're very interested in chickens and eggs.
Hey.
Having recently got your own.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, Blackadder discovers that this is not going to be as easy as he thought, because none of the eligible titled ladies are going to meet none of them are going to be practical choices or meet George's requirements. So,
of the 262 princesses in Europe, 165 are over 80, they're out. 47 are under 10, they're out. And 39 are mad.
Well, they sound ideal.
Well, they would be if they hadn't all got married last week in Munich to the same horse. Which leaves us with 2.
And what about them?
Well, there's Grand Duchess Sophia of Turin. We'll never get her to marry him.
Why not?
Because she's met him.
Leaves
Caroline of Brunswick is the only available princess in Europe.
I do have a bit of trivia to insert here.
Yes, please.
As Blackadder is going through the list of possible wives for George, he mentions Caroline of Brunswick, as the only available princess, but dismisses her as having a horrible personality. Well, in real life, George did in fact marry Caroline of Brunswick.
Oh,
Who was
really?
his first cousin. But the marriage happened before George assumed the regency, and after George was already legally married. He was reportedly drunk during the ceremony and wedding night, and the marriage was an unmitigated disaster. And it goes on from there, but yeah, I just thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah, so he gives up on the titled ladies and he has an idea, and he looks in the newspaper, and he's reading the paper using this amazing magnifying glass.
Oh, it's very ornate.
Very large.
Yeah. But then again,
anyway,
the print in those old papers is truly incredibly small.
And you would know.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, he finds what he's looking for. He finds an article that says that Miss Amy Hardwood has come to London and is spending flipping great wadges of cash.
Yeah.
Yep, so that's the kind of person that he's looking for.
Yeah, and it's brilliant journalistic terminology there. It's yeah.
Oh, I think I might have added the flipping great wadges of cash.
No, it's definitely in the script. Oh, yes.
Oh, is it? I thought it might have been
absolutely
later
it
on.
is. You nailed the line perfectly.
You're the resident expert on double entendres. Does her name signify anything?
Well, Amy Hardwood.
Yes.
Well, this is something that Ben Elton and... Because in the commentary, you've got Ben Elton and John Lloyd, the producer, and Richard Curtis, the other writer. And they were saying that it wasn't so much that they missed an opportunity to hammer that home. It's just that they thought they'd leave well enough alone with that particular surname.
Right.
Yeah.
Hammering at home, you're thinking of the turnip, aren't you?
I am thinking of the radish, Steve. The
radish, sorry.
Yeah, the radish.
I'm confusing my root vegetables.
I think so.
Yes, anyway, Amy Hardwood is the daughter of an industrialist who's patented the Raveling Nancy, which is a fictional invention, which I suppose is inspired by the Spinning Jenny.
Yeah.
So heading back upstairs, Blackadder talks the prince into wooing Miss Hardwood with a love note. He says, a short note expressing your honourable intentions. Which, yeah, well, by the way, I've got a whole load of things in the gags section, so I'm obviously skipping over some of these.
Yeah, very wise.
Some of these.
Yes.
Yes. Anyway, George proves himself woefully equipped to write a short note expressing his honourable intentions. So Blackadder has to rewrite his draft into something that's suitable. And the next scene sees Blackadder delivering that message to Amy on George's behalf. Now, Amy, it turns out, is as thick as a whale omelette.
Yeah.
She's pretty dense. Pretty light and fluffy. But
I'd say worse than Baldrick.
Yes, I would agree with you. Yes, Blackadder the Third, Baldrick anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anywho, they do arrange, though, that George is going to come and serenade Amy that night, and she'll be on her balcony in her gym jams. But before Blackadder leaves, Mr. Hardwood enters the room. Now, he's a proud father. He loves his daughter more than any pig.
Yeah, that says of it.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
anyway, so they have
a pig would be a valuable commodity, just not as valuable as one's daughter, I imagine.
No, quite. So they have a brief exchange, and we do discover that this supposedly rich man would give Amy to the prince for 10 bob and a pickled egg. Just, there's a bit of foreshadowing going on here, I think. Blackadder also mentions Lady Hamilton to Mr. Hardwood as someone who got by on good looks and charm.
Yes.
Now, as an aside, Dame Emma Hamilton, who was born Amy Lyon, yes, generally was known as Lady Hamilton. She was an English maid, model, dancer and actress who began her career in London's demi-monde. How do you say that? Anyway.
I don't know.
She started out from humble beginnings, but she became the mistress of a series of wealthy men, culminating in the naval hero, Lord Nelson.
Whoa, okay.
And sounds a bit like Evita as well.
What about Tim Eater?
Who?
You don't remember Tim Eater from the Goodies who sang "Don't Cry for Me, Marge and Tina"?
I do. I've got very fond memories of Tim Eater.
Yeah. Oh, good. Very good.
With her tiara and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. So we're back in the kitchen, Jeff. The chicken is now getting stuffed, and Blackadder is considering the immensity of the task before him, which is trying to serenade a light, fluffy bunny of a girl in the company of an arrogant, half-German yob with a mad dad. So, then on to the serenading. George suggests serenading her with Harold the Horny Hunter.
Harold the Horny Hunter should do the trick.
Just remind me of it, sir.
Harold the Horny Hunter had an enormous horn.
It is absolutely excellent, sir. However, might I suggest an alternative?
But Blackadder doesn't think that's such a good idea. And
No, probably not. I reckon he's right.
Yeah, he's right. So he's pre-prepared a lovey-dovey poem, which is more Amy speed. But he is obliged to cover George's mouth in order to stop him ruining the whole situation. Now, this is a reference to a famous scene in Cyrano de Bergerac, and which was written by Edmond Rostand. Now, yes, there's a scene in Cyrano de Bergerac where there's wooing underneath the window. Yeah, so Blackadder does manage to salvage the situation, but it has been so exciting that Amy has to go to sleepy bobos, so she takes off to go and get her beauty sleep. But it went so well that the next day, at her home, Blackadder arrives to ask for her hand in marriage on the prince's behalf. Mr. Hardwood is very agreeable, as he too is broke, and realising that, Blackadder immediately withdraws his offer.
He's practical, if nothing else.
Well, he's got to be.
Yeah.
And to make things worse, when he returns home, he discovers that the prince, who thinks he's marrying into a fortune, has gone out and bought a massive quantity of wedding gifts. So, yeah, the problem has been compounded.
Now, I know we shouldn't be talking about stuff during the synopsis, but I just want to comment on the brilliant direction of that, because on paper, that gag doesn't work at all, because the minute Blackadder walks into the room, you can see all the visual evidence of the huge mounds of golden trinkets that George has spent all this money on. But you've got a beautiful close-up on Blackadder's face as he pops his head through the door and says, "Oh, Prince George, you know how I said to go out and start spending on wedding presents." And then you cut to the wide shot, and it's hilarious. So it's beautifully handled, I feel.
I'm glad you mentioned that one. That was absolutely superb.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Well, in this scenario, there's only one thing for it, Jeff. Can you feel us? We're circling back to Baldric's cunning plan.
Oh, yeah. No, as the solution. Oh, no. It's always a bad sign when you have to go with Baldric's plan.
Well, it's never going to be your first option, is it?
I guess not, yeah.
No. So he decides he's going to become a highwayman. Unfortunately, the prince's horse has been crashed.
Oh, and it's beautifully phrased, isn't it?
Into a pole, a light pole.
He's wrapped it round a lamppost in the Strand. Oh, my goodness.
Blackadder's horse has been eaten. What do you think you've been eating for the last month?
Yeah.
And for reasons that I'll get into later on in the podcast, none can be hired. Which means that Baldric has got to become his horse.
Yeah.
And Blackadder hands him the bridle and bit. Says, put that on.
Yeah. You could do with the exercise, he says to Baldric.
Which is obviously not true.
Yeah.
Baldric's up and down those stairs 30 times a day.
Oh, man.
So the next scene, we find a carriage containing the Duke and Miss Cheapside. Mm-hmm. And they're obviously making their way from somewhere to somewhere. But they're told to stand and deliver by a masked Blackadder who appears at the carriage door. And I think this is probably the funniest scene in sitcom history.
It's up there.
I'll talk more about later. But it ends with Blackadder making off with a jewel and cash. So, having taken this from them, he and his trusty steed, they stop off at an unrealistic grassy knoll where the loot gets divided between the highwayman and his horse. But almost immediately, a second robbery occurs where Blackadder then relieves Baldric of his share.
Yeah, after being all equitable and lovely and fair and nice, He immediately reverts to type. Oh, my goodness.
Yes, but it's all fair and above board.
Oh, yeah, no, Baldrick doesn't mind. He's not holding any grudges.
Absolutely not. Then they've just done that, and then a deep voice booms out. And it's the Shadow, Jeff.
Uh-oh.
The real one. Strangely, though, the Shadow doesn't ask for their loot. The Shadow wants a kiss.
Not from Baldrick, though.
No, not from Baldrick, from Blackadder. And he reluctantly says yes. But then it's revealed that Amy is the Shadow.
Dun, dun, dun.
Who saw that coming?
No, I didn't.
And she craves Blackadder's fabulous sinewy body.
Yeah, well, that's what she says, yes.
Who could blame her?
Yeah, she's only human, as Blackadder would point out.
Yes. And again, this is a parody of a British film called The Wicked Lady from 1945, which had both the basic plot of a woman posing as a male highwayman, and also, you can tell that because Amy, while she's pretending to be a man, speaks in an imitation of the voice of James Mason, who starred as Captain Jackson in the original movie.
Aha.
So there's all these little nods going on, Jeff.
Wow, yeah.
Yes, Amy, a.k.a. the Shadow, she's got a cunning, romantic and swashbuckling plan to propose. And the plan is something like this.
Here's the plan, Brown Eyes. You rob the prince of everything he's got, right down to the clothes he's standing in. I'll get my stash and meet you here, and then we'll run away to the West Indies.
Well, I don't know. I'll have to think about it. I've thought about it. It's a brilliant plan. I'll see you here tomorrow.
Which he thinks sounds like a pretty good plan.
Yeah.
So he immediately heads home to start packing up all of the prince's most valuable possessions in a wheelbarrow, I think. But he's cautioned by Baldrick, who shows him a poster, like a wanted poster, and he mentions that the reward for, I guess, information leading to capture of the Shadow, it's gone up. It's now £5,000 reward for that.
Oh.
Yeah, so he's just saying, take it easy, be careful. But Blackadder, of course, laughs in the face of danger, tweaks the nose of fear, tips ice cubes down the vest of fear, etc., etc.
And the dreadful spindly killer fish.
Yeah, all those things.
Yeah.
And then he says to Baldrick, she'll get me abroad and make me rich, then I'll probably drop her and get 200 concubines to share my bed. So he's already planning to double-cross, I won't say double-cross her because that gives too much away, but he's already planning ahead to move on.
Yes, he's not very nice, old Blackadder, but, that's why we love him.
Yeah, that's true. Mrs. Miggins now makes the appearance, which we talked about earlier on. She appears because she's heard that Blackadder has bought a bathing suit and 40 gallons of coconut oil. So, are you planning on leaving us? What made you think that?
Her powers of deduction are incredible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And she tries talking him out of it. She always thought that they'd eventually settle down, and she was awaiting the slither of tiny adders.
Yeah. It's so nice.
So lovely. The slither of tiny adders.
Yeah.
Anyway, Blackadder wheels this wheelbarrow back to the knoll, and Amy says she's got a surprise for him and tells him to open his mouth, and she sticks a gun in it and reveals that her plan is to kill and rob him when she returns at midnight. So she must, I haven't got it written here, but she must tie him up or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he says, "Oh God, what a way to die. Shot by a transvestite on an unrealistic grassy knoll."
It's a very 20th century, 21st century line, not a, 18th century or whenever this was.
Yes, but then in a piece of superb timing, Baldrick arrives. He's there to get the Shadow's autograph.
Oh, for his scrapbook, yes.
For his highwayman scrap. But he's brought the latest poster. The latest wanted poster. I think he's going to get the Shadow to sign this, right? Is that the idea?
Yeah, get the Shadow to sign the wanted poster. Oh, that's what I always thought.
Yeah, but the reward's gone up to £10,000, so it's going up all the time.
Oh, what an incredible fortune.
Yes, and Blackadder puts two and two together and he says, "Let me go and go find a mob of soldiers or policemen or whatever and come back here and meet me at midnight." And so obviously we know what he's up to here. And then we cut to a scene the next day. Well, I had morning question mark in brackets because it wouldn't surprise me if the prince is getting out of bed
At noon.
after midday.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, but he is having breakfast, so maybe that's where I got morning from. He's quite hungry, and he's reading the newspaper while he's having his breakfast. So he discovers in this article in the newspaper that Amy has been arrested as the Shadow.
Yeah. Oh.
He's miffed that has happened to his fiancée. And
Yes.
reading the paper to Blackadder, it says that she had an accomplice, and at this point he drops the breakfast tray onto the ground.
This is yeah, keep going.
But then he continues on reading, and it says, but I don't know who it was. And the tray comes back up into Blackadder's hand.
You don't often see this sort of thing in Blackadder. It's a very young one's bit of business, I think.
Yes, it is a bit.
Oh, man.
But it's genius. Yes, and then the prince goes on to say, actually, I don't need to get married anyway. I got peckish in the middle of the night, and I went down the kitchen, and I found £10,000 in a biscuit barrel, which I didn't know I had.
Yeah.
And Blackadder, without missing a beat, what does he suggest they do next?
Yeah. How about a game of cards? Yeah.
A game of cards.
Because you feel awful for Blackadder at this point. And yeah, just immediately they sort it right out.
Yeah. Just when you think he's down again.
Yeah.
He turns it around. He always does.
Very satisfying.
Very, very satisfying. So, yes, that's the end of our synopsis. I've got a big lunch. I've already had lunch. No, I've got a...
Did you have a dolphin on toast, Steve, for lunch?
Not today, no.
Okay.
They don't sell them down the local supermarket.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, so I've got a large list of quality gags.
Uh-huh.
And I've also got some final thoughts as well. All right, so do you want to go first?
Yeah, well, look, instead of gags and the final thoughts, I've got things what I writ down from the commentary. Yeah, so John Lloyd thinks along the same lines as you here, Steve. So
hang on. For the listeners, who is John Lloyd?
John Lloyd, yes, good point. He is the producer of Blackadder 3.
Mm-hmm.
And John Lloyd, the producer, said pretty early on in the commentary that it's his favourite episode of Series 3. Now, whether it's his favourite episode for all of Blackadder that he produced, I'm not sure. And as you'd expect, some of the other stuff that came up over the half-hour commentary was that how lucky they were to have people like Rowan Atkinson and Hugh Laurie at those stages of their career. It's a brilliant cast all round.
Yep.
And obviously they commented on being a historical sitcom, and I totally agree with this, that it doesn't date anywhere near as much as other 80s sitcoms.
The only joke that dates in this one is the reference to the Prince of Wales talking to his plants.
Yeah. Oh, man.
No one's going to get that one in another... Well, I don't know if the younger generation would even get that now, but...
yeah, possibly
yeah,
not.
Anyhow.
Yeah, look, and so I just enjoyed... I don't normally listen to sitcom commentaries on DVDs I've got, but I thought I'd go the extra mile, this time around. And what I will do, Steve, on a completely separate note, is I will forego the opportunity to play a round of What's It Worth Now, thinking about what a £10,000 reward in the time of King George is, and how much you could get that for that. I think about 3 million pints of beer, possibly. But I won't do that, Steve.
You could buy the whole brewery.
Yeah.
But it does give you an idea of how much work Amy had been putting in as the Shadow. If they're prepared to give a reward of £10,000, she must have stolen an immense amount of money. All right, so how are you finished with your...
Oh, that's I'm finished with the commentary, so I suppose I should hand back to you for some Fabo gags.
All right, well, I think I've got a pretty comprehensive list here, but pull me up if there's any I've missed. So the scene at the start of the episode where Blackadder's going through his bills, he says he feels like a pelican. There's always a large bill in front of me.
Yeah.
By the way, I use many of these quotes and jokes in everyday life at home.
Yes.
And that's one of them. We've got Baldrick's cunning plan to solve the problem of his mother's low ceiling by cutting off her head. That to me is the best of the cunning plan, the recurring cunning plan gags. We've got the Shadow. Well, the Shadow is halfway to being the new Robin Hood.
Why is that, Steve?
Why is the Shadow only halfway to being the new Robin Hood?
Because they've done the whole stealing from the rich bit, but haven't quite gotten around to giving it to the poor.
No.
It is a good joke, and like you'd think that sort of thing would be quite predictable halfway to being the new Robin Hood, but I didn't find it predictable at all.
Yes. So they're all from the very first scene, and then we move upstairs for when Blackadder's going to ask the prince for a raise, and he's gobsmacked that he's spent all the money, and he says, "What happened to the £1,000 that Parliament gave you to drink yourself to death?"
Which is, well, that's just objectively hilarious, no matter which way you slice it. I love that joke.
Yeah. And the prince, when he's objecting to this idea of him getting married, he says, I'm a gay bachelor. He says, "I can't get married. I'm a roarer. I'm a gorger, a rogerer, and a puker."
Yeah. Oh, man.
Blackadder counters by saying, "Well, the modern church smiles upon roaring and gorging in wedlock, and rogering is keenly encouraged." And George says, "And the puking?"
To which Blackadder replies, "I think that's down to the conscience of the individual churchgoer."
Yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Yes. Yes, we've already talked about Blackadder being terrible at gambling because he always ends up with more money than he started with.
Oh.
Then back downstairs, Baldrick has cut out a picture of the Shadow from the newspaper for his highwayman scrapbook. We briefly mentioned that earlier on. And then we have a classic line which probably you need to insert as a clip.
Oh, and Les, pass me the paper, Baldrick, quick. Baldrick, why has half the front page been cut out?
I don't know.
You do know, don't you?
Yes.
You've been cutting out the cuttings about the elusive Shadow to put in your highwayman scrapbook, haven't you?
Oh, I can't help it, Mr. B. His life is so dark and shadowy and full of fear and trepidation.
So is going to the toilet in the middle of the night when you don't keep a scrapbook on it.
I do?
Let's see.
Yeah, no, look, this is in, I think if you're about to say what I think you're about to say, Steve, I reckon this is in my list of gags. But I've just got written Baldrick's scrapbooks, most importantly, his one on going to the toilet in the middle of the night.
Yes.
Which is, that's, and then he just goes, "I do?" It's just so cool.
Very good. And when Tony Robinson says, "I do," he's not looking at the camera, but he's
looking to
staring
the
off
distance,
into the staring off into the distance in the direction of the camera, and it's just absolute genius.
It really is. But
yes,
like,
back up.
What's he putting in this scrapbook? Because as one goes through the papers in the morning, you don't, would you see a lot of articles on going to the toilet in the middle of the night? It's a scrapbook. It's not a diary, right? So he's not just keeping diary entries of his visits to the toilet in the middle of the night. Presumably, it's articles on other people's visits to the toilet in the middle of the night. It's so rich, this joke, Steve, that you have to ponder these things.
Are there any famous stories of someone getting up to go to the toilet in the middle of the night and seeing a ghost or something?
Could be.
Something like that. Yeah.
There's probably whole Shakespeare plays on it.
Yes, probably. Anywho, this isn't a Upstart Crow episode. This is a Blackadder episode, so we'll keep going.
Good call.
We've got Prince George's explanation back upstairs of what it means to be radished. And as we've already said, Blackadder says there's no need to hammer at home. We've got him... so his opening line to his love poem, which he's drafting for Amy, is, "Tally ho, my fine, saucy young trollop."
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Blackadder says, "Can I change just one aspect of your love note?" And George says, "Which one?" And Blackadder says, "The words."
Oh. Yeah. And Prince George doesn't mind. He goes, yes, or you handle all the details, Blackadder. Oh, man. Yeah, that's so good.
And then when he turns up to woo Amy at her balcony, he says, "Right, oi, come on out here, you rollicking, trolloping sauce bottle."
Oh, he's a delusional dude, Prince George.
He's not he's a bit of a sexist.
Yeah, he lacks sensitivity.
That too. When we've got Blackadder making a reappearance at the Hardwood house to deliver this proposal, he says to Mr. Hardwood, this is the prince, he wants your daughter Amy for his wife. And Mr. Hardwood says, well, his wife can't have her. Outrageous, sir, to come here with such a suggestion. Why, sir, or I shall take off my belt and by thunder, me trousers will fall down.
Yeah. Like it starts with beautiful wordplay and then it ends up planting a brilliant image in your mind. Yeah. It's just, this is textbook stuff, dude. This is what people should be doing when they're writing sitcoms.
Yep. Now, another one of my oft-used ones is Blackadder asking Baldrick, have you got no idea what irony is?
Yeah.
Sure, it's like Goldie and Bronzy only made of iron. Oh, that is one of the best gags ever.
Yeah.
It has to be.
It's technically true.
I wonder if that's the kind of thing that they just came up with when they were going through the rehearsals.
Yeah,
and
it's not a deep gag that requires a lot of thought to arrive at. It's just like the most basic suggestion ever, but it works so well.
Okay, so next up we've got one of the greatest comic monologues of all time, which is Baldrick questioning or retorting to Blackadder's request for a horse. And I think we need a clip for this one because this one for me is up there with Inspector Grimm's hoity-toity rant. It's kind of a difficult thing to get your mouth around, and Tony Robinson just does a fantastic job.
Just saddle the prince's horse.
Well, that'll be difficult. He wrapped around that gas lamp in the Strand last night.
Well, saddle my horse then.
What do you think you've been eating for the last 2 months?
Well, go out into the street and hire me a horse.
Hire your horse? For 9pence? On Jewish New Year in the rain? A bare fortnight after the dreaded horse plague of old London town? With the blacksmith strike in its 15th week and the Dorset Horse Fetishists Fair tomorrow?
Fantastic.
I was going to say, Steve, there's also the early horse gag as well with the mad potential brides at around the 5-minute mark, where he said, and 39 of these potential brides for the prince are mad. And Baldrick goes, well, they sound ideal. And he goes, well, they would be, Baldrick, if they hadn't all got married last week in Denmark to the same horse.
I know, I had the script open on the internet and I was searching for horse to try and find my way back to one of these gags. And yeah, like you're saying, there's a number of references to horses and they're all brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
And then we move on to the carriage scene, the Cheapside's carriage, which is just so funny. So I think we need to do that justice by inserting another clip.
It's the Shadow! We're doomed! Doomed!
Hi, good evening, Duke. And the lovely Miss Cheapside. Your cash bags, please. There we are. Turn out your pockets.
Never, sir. A man's pockets are his own private kingdom. I'll protect them with my life.
Oh, I see. You got something embarrassing in there, have you? Perhaps a particularly repulsive handkerchief, huh? One of these fellows who has a big blow and then doesn't change it for a week.
Highwayman, I also have a jewel. I fear, however, that I have placed it here, beneath my petticoats, for protection.
Well, in that case, madam, I think I'll leave it. I'm not sure I fancy the idea of a jewel that's been in someone's pants. A single kiss of those soft lips is all I require.
Never, sir. A man's soft lips are his own private kingdom. I shall defend them with my life.
I'm not talking to you, Grandad.
Well, that's not fair then. I've had you on my back for 10 miles, I haven't even got a kiss out of it.
Oh, all right, very well then. All fair now?
Not really, no.
No pleasing some horses. Hi-yo, Quicksilver!
Particularly the joke where Blackadder consents to Baldrick getting a kiss, and then from out of nowhere gives him the kiss himself. That is my favourite joke ever.
Because Blackadder's known for being aware of every situation and able to react perfectly appropriately to every single situation. But in this is the one time he does not understand what Baldrick's driving at, and he does not react appropriately in this situation, and he's a bit self-obsessed thinking Baldrick would want a kiss from him. But yeah, no, you're right, it's brilliant. And yes, sorry Steve, you were probably about to enlighten us.
No, it's just the way the expectations get blown apart and he gets the kiss.
That's comedy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep, and then of course we've also got the other references to getting damn well hung for his crime. Jewels in the Pants, Private Kingdoms, all that sort of stuff is just amazing.
Yeah, that's one of my 3 gags, is a man's soft lips or his own private kingdom. And again, that's completely defied the expectations in exactly the same way Baldrick's Kiss does.
Yeah.
It's just, that's exactly comedy summed up right there.
Yep. Now, moving on to what might be one of your favourites, which is the scene where Amy starts shooting squirrels. So we established that she's killed her father, which is pretty grim line, but then she says he's as dead as that squirrel. So they kind of lighten it a bit. And Blackadder, of course, says, which squirrel? To which she just picks a squirrel in the trees and shoots it. And you get this amazing squirrel dying noise.
Yeah, it was a no-look,
kind of a squeak.
A no-look trick shot too. She just throws her arm up in the air, not even looking, goes bang. And as she squeezes the trigger, like she emphasises it with her face. And then you hear the sooty and squeaky toy noise as the squirrel buys the farm. Oh, man.
What's she doing, emphasising her distaste for squirrels with her face?
I think it was the trigger pull. Maybe she had to put a hell of a lot of effort into squeezing the trigger.
Then back in the kitchen, we've got Blackadder announcing his plan to ditch Amy and take on the 200 concubines, and Baldrick says, won't they be rather prickly?
Yep.
And Blackadder says, concubines, Baldrick, not porcupines.
And that's a call back to the Young Ones episode we did in episode 87 just previously.
Oh, how so?
Yeah, because remember when they were on that prison ship sailing to Australia, and you were saying you didn't particularly like that bit, and Mr. Barry from Red Dwarf, he goes, you'll be our ship's cook and concubine, and the young lady says, what's a concubine? And he says, it's a small spiky mammal.
Well done, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's just a shameless plug for people to go back and listen to episode 87.
Yes, go ahead and do that, listeners. But
cool.
It's not when in the episode of Blackadder Goes Forth, when they do the painting in No Man's Land, it's not porcupines that in a bag that gets painted, is it?
No, it's hedgehogs, isn't it?
Some other hedgehog. Okay, all right.
I mean, fair enough, dude. I mean, porcupine, hedgehog, echidna. I throw them all in the same zoological barrel,
They're all interchangeable.
Yeah.
All right. So then we're moving on, or we're finishing with the breakfast, and the prince being so hungry he could eat 14 trays of breakfast and still have room for a dolphin on toast.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Quite the picture, isn't it?
Oh,
I wonder if he ever ate a dolphin on toast in real life.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure Jeremy Clarkson has, because he goes to this restaurant where they specialise in, and there was a Goodies episode on this. They had an endangered species club, hunting endangered species. But in real life, I think Jeremy Clarkson goes to this restaurant because I remember his anecdote he told about the waiter said, "Would you like some grated puffin on that, sir?" And this is a real place where you can get some grated puffin.
Is this when they were off in some far-flung exotic location?
No, I think it's a British club that gentlemen go to. They go to their club and you can have a spot of grated puffin. I'm not sure, Steve. It's just in the distant recesses of my memory there. But yeah. I don't know if I fancy some grated puffin. Sorry, what were you saying?
That's our second Top Gear reference in this episode.
Oh, is it really? Oh my goodness.
That's bizarre. Right, so really now I've just got a bunch of concluding thoughts to go through.
Oh, good.
Did I miss any gags?
No. Look, if you listed all the top shelf gags, we'd be here all day, and we certainly have been. We're coming up to the hour mark, but before you launch into your, that's
I was just thinking he's going to tell me we've been talking for 2 hours already.
Yeah. This is such a good episode, though. I think you need that long to cover it. Look, I'll just share some stuff before you launch into your putting the case. And that is the only negative thing I can say is that during the balcony scene, I think there's a couple of awkward moments that don't quite hit. But I think that's for me. I think that's just tension. But the beauty of that balcony scene, Steve-O, is that it ends with that quite charming and lovely bit of dialogue where because Blackadder has had to manhandle the prince quite a bit to stop him from shouting out obscenities, right? So he's had to... Yeah,
he punched his lights out, Jeff.
Yeah. So he goes, I think that went well, Your Highness. And he goes, yes, but I'm in agony. And then Blackadder says, well, that's love for you. And
yes.
yeah, so I think that redeems the whole scene for me. But there are bits in the balcony scene I don't fancy. But then again, I'm not a Cyrano de Bergerac sort of chappy. But I just wanted to point out that I've got a note here that just says, nobody says the word pants quite like Rowan Atkinson does. And I just want to give a shout out to the bits of prop comedy in this episode, dude, because Baldrick's turkey, or chicken rather, he's stuffing it through most of the first 2/3 of the episode. Like Blackadder will go off to a meeting over at Mr. Hardwood's joint to meet Amy and come back, and Baldrick's still working on the chicken. Now, I mean, obviously it could be a completely different chicken, but when Baldrick is talking about how much he loves the lifestyle of the Shadow and keeps his scrapbook on it, he's waving the chicken about. Yeah. It's such a beautiful bit of prop comedy. And also Blackadder does his bit with the magnifying glass and the clothes brush. So I thought, all these lines are so unbelievably good, but the actors are doing their best with visual stuff as well. So,
And we've already talked about the wedding presents and the tray.
Oh, yeah. No, that's
well.
some
So there's
directorial work. Yeah.
A lot of good stuff.
And look, just coming back and watching this episode again after quite a while, I've always sort of taken Baldrick for granted, and by extension, I suppose I've taken Tony Robinson for granted, but the character of Baldrick is just so good, and Tony Robinson's so good, and it's just funny and believable. You believe that Baldrick is a real person. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but,
He's such an innocent character. I was thinking to myself, Blackadder is tied up on this unrealistic grassy knoll. His life is really in Baldrick's hands. Baldrick could have turned around and said, well, actually...
Screw you.
Hang on. Yeah. I want a fabulous turnip, or... Yeah. He could have turned this situation to his advantage some way if he was that way inclined, but no. Yeah. Not at all.
It's lovely.
What a guy.
And also, calling back to flipping great wads of cash, that's a phrase that's used around here, and I'm glad you mentioned early on that you've got phrases from this episode that you use quite often. Well, look, I'm just going to finish off by saying I've got two more things to bring up, Steve-O, and the first one is Rowan Atkinson gets even more praise here for his great horse acting, right? Because when he's doing the hold-up, and of course, Tony Robinson would be standing off to one side. He wouldn't actually be underneath Rowan Atkinson at this stage. So Rowan Atkinson, delivering all that brilliant dialogue, he's sort of slightly wobbling about, as if he's on a horse and the horse is moving underneath him. So that's tip-top.
Yes. I started making a point by saying that, we have this fairly close-up shot of them in the carriage, and what I meant to do, and what I should have done, was followed through by saying that tightness means that we don't get to see Baldrick as the horse until this amazing reveal a bit further on in the scene, so that works really well.
It's just, it totally all works.
No, I like the point you made about the horse riding acting. I hadn't thought about that.
Oh, I'm glad to have brought a good point to the table. At the very beginning, when Blackadder's bringing up the, hey, George, you're probably going to have to get married to get you some hands on your cash, and Prince George goes through that list of qualities that he'd like in a potential bride.
Tally-ho then, Blackadder. Yes, you fix it up. You know the kind of girls I like. They've got to be lovers, laughers, dancers.
And bonkers.
That goes without saying.
I was just going to say, I think the use of bonkers is just such a perfect... Yes, she has to be crazy to marry the prince, but he also likes a woman who likes to bonk. And so if you're a kid watching that, you'll think, Blackadder's being nasty to the prince by saying she'd have to be crazy to marry him, and at the same time he's saying and that's probably the most perfect example I've ever seen. It's just so good, Steve.
Yes, and you've brought us back around to Baldrick saying that someone mad would be just perfect for the prince.
Yeah, dude. So they've tied that all up, and yes, I'll hand it over to you for the final.
All right, we'll run through these last series of notes. So, looking at the storyline, I was really surprised how in that first scene we just get straight into it. Like, the whole thing is so tight. The money problem, the highwayman suggestion, and the wanted poster are all in that first scene in the first couple of minutes.
Uh-huh.
And there's so much story crammed in here. and that's illustrated by this, I called it a 3-part structure. I don't know if it follows the typical 3-part structure for a story, but you've got the first one, which is about marrying the prince off, and then that gets scrapped, and the second one comes along, which is him, Blackadder, becoming a highwayman to solve the problem, and then the third one, which is that we're going to rob the prince and run away. So all that, 3 different progressions of the plot in half an hour, so it's packed in there. In fact, it's so fast that the prince completely skips the second act. We're seeing him have his breakfast. He still thinks that Amy is his fiancée.
Yeah. and meanwhile,
she's only a night has passed or something like that.
Yeah.
Or only a day has passed, and he's completely out of the loop about everything that's been going on. I also really like Amy's character because she's resourceful, devious, and a bit mad, which makes her a good matchup against Blackadder. And I like to see him challenged by someone, not just getting his own way.
It doesn't happen all that often, does it? No.
And it's so we don't get a Bob character in Blackadder the Third, whereas we do in second and fourth series, and that's a character where you have a woman fairly straightforwardly she's playing a woman disguised as a man for some fairly straightforward or noble reason.
Yep.
Is that right? But then here we get kind of an interesting take on that because Amy's doing it for completely nefarious, greedy, adventurous purposes. So I find it quite an interesting take on the Bob character as
totally.
substitute for that in series 3. Oh, there's I know you're going to like this. They beautifully seeded plot points early on. So if we're paying attention, we can find out that Amy is not what she appears because the paper says that she's spending flipping great wadges of cash in London. So where is she getting that money from if it's not from her father?
Oh, Steve, I've never thought of this. That's actually really, really smart.
Yeah, so a couple of other examples. We've already talked about her dad being really enthusiastic in his first scene about Amy marrying the prince, which kind of hints at their poverty but doesn't disclose it. That's saved until later. We've also got the solution of having Amy arrested for the reward. That's seeded right in the first scene. And then also the other solution, which is Blackadder playing cards with the prince. That's all laid out very early on as well. So it's amazing stuff.
Yep. Would you call it Fawlty Towers level of plotting? Or would you call it, say, 90% of that?
I'd say
it's got to be 85%, surely.
It's up there, but it's not quite Fawlty Towers. Fawlty Towers, this script still has room for these offbeat jokes that are... there's so many different kinds of jokes in this one.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas Fawlty Towers is very much heading down the same path of humour all the time, whereas this one kind of takes you off in different directions.
Absolutely. And it has to be, Fawlty Towers has to be rooted in reality, and it's so good at that. Whereas this doesn't have to be rooted in reality, hence my comments earlier about the tray and the reverse filming to have the tray leaping back up into Blackadder's hands. So, really, this can have its cake and eat it too, and it totally does.
Yep. Yeah, I love the historic nods. I'm all about the historic information and bits and pieces and jokes that are throughout the episode. We talked about a couple of those. Love the twists and turns and the cross and the double cross. I'm not sure if there's a triple cross, but there's a lot of crosses in there, Jeff.
Yeah. Yes.
And, of course, it's all tied up with that bow when Blackadder, not even flustered, proposes the card game with Prince George he's going to get his £10,000 back. I presume he doesn't put it back in the biscuit barrel.
You'd hope not. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, that's why we love him, because he's sort of unflappable.
Yep. Well, that brings us to the end of that, Jeff. I can't think of an episode that's got more top quality jokes crammed into it than this one.
Yeah, this episode really does do it all. So, obviously it's a shoe-in for the Hall of Fame. I think from minute 1 of this podcast it probably was. Yeah, I'm glad we've nailed down Blackadder to such an extent.
Yep. All right, it's in the Hall of Fame then.
How could it not be?
Cool. Well,
it's all downhill from here, isn't it? It's just occurred to me, Steve, sorry to cut you off there, that again, the last 2 episodes have been Ben Elton episodes, and early in our Sitcom Showdown careers, we did have to institute no Ben for 10. I don't think we're in any danger of having to worry about that now, because we're not exactly going to bring in an episode of The Right Way or something like that. But no, it's been good to sort of come back around and get some more Ben Elton happening, I think. And I often forget that Richard Curtis is involved in this stuff as well, and the other writers.
You mentioned our previous episode. I just wanted to say thanks to the people that have left comments about that Young Ones episode on the YouTubes. Thanks very much. It's great to get people's feedback, and people are always saying, there's this fact or this bit of trivia about that as well, which you missed. So thanks to everyone for adding those comments in, and keep them coming.
Cool. All right, well, we will be back for Christmas. We'll zip off and start work on the next episode.
All right. See you then.
All right, take care. Join us next time on Sitcom Showdown, when we'll be putting another 5-star episode under the microscope. And in the meantime, you can contact us with feedback on Facebook, Twitter @Sitcom Showdown, or by email sitcomshowdown@gmail.com.